Yo, what is up guys? It's Pedro here, and in today's video I will be going over the 5 biggest holes on the Washington football team that they need to address this offseason. So whether it's free agency, the trade market, or the draft, I'll be talking about the 5 biggest holes they need to address. So if you guys are new, make sure to subscribe for Washington and NFL content. Hit that like button and turn on those notifications. It really helps out the channel a ton. Also, go ahead and follow my Twitter. I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers on there. I would really appreciate it. Now, let's get right into the video. So heading into the 2022 NFL offseason, the Washington football team definitely has some clear holes they need to address, whether it's the draft or free agency. They definitely have some major holes, so we're going to be going over that in today's video. Going into the offseason, they have a solid amount of cap space, about $37 million in cap space. It was a little bit higher, but they did re-sign Charles Leno and, Jordan Kay, which is very minimal, but still a couple other players as well. But there's ways that they can get that number even higher than it is, which is still a pretty good amount. I mean, Landon Collins, I think they will either ask him to take a pay cut or restructure that deal. I mean, John Keimer, talked about that on his podcast, so they can probably get that to about 41 mil, maybe even more. And then there's a few other players they might move on from, but they're in a good cap situation, and they have a decent amount of draft picks where they can definitely address a lot of these holes this offseason. So let's go to the first major hole, not really in order, but the first one, definitely the most important thing that they need to address, and that's the quarterback position. They need to do whatever it takes to go and get a quarterback this year that is clearly better than what they had last year. I think, it's going to be hard to get the big names like Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, who just lost yesterday, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, but I think they should do everything they can, especially to get the guys like Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers. I still would like Derek Carr, but he's not in the same category as those other three. But the Washington football team, obviously need a upgrade at the quarterback position. It's their biggest hole. You just look at the Bengals. 2 years ago, they're the worst team in the NFL. 2 years later, they're in the AFC Championship, and primarily because of Joe Burrow, because of a franchise quarterback. Yes, they have other aspects of their team that have improved in the last couple of years. Jamar Chase, getting him was great, but also a lot of it is Joe Burrow elevating the play around him. And, they still don't have an amazing roster besides Joe Burrow. Look at their offensive line yesterday. It was terrible. The run game is solid. They've got great receivers, and on defense, they've got a decent defense. They've drafted well the last couple of years, but still, their roster besides, Joe Burrow, it's not an elite roster like some of these other teams. It's similar to our roster, but they have a franchise quarterback, and that is what matters in this league, and we don't have one. And not only do they have a franchise quarterback, they have like a top 5, top 7 guy, and he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks for the next 10, 15 years. So it's going to be hard to get a guy like that, but they should do everything they can to try to get, Watson if he's cleared, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, and, if not, then you can go for someone like Derek Carr. I would stay away from someone like Jimmy G just because, it's tough to win, go deep with him. And if you do, it has to be a team like the 49ers are right now, which is one of the best rosters in the NFL. They have a top to bottom, one of the better rosters in the NFL. And Jimmy G he's a game manager. He's a better version of what Alex Smith was for Washington. And the biggest issue with him, in my opinion, isn't really the play, it's the injury. Yesterday he didn't have a great game, but that's because he was dealing with a shoulder and a hand/finger injury and some other injuries as well. And, that's an issue because it happens every year. Multiple injuries, he's ACL, other stuff as well. So that's what, concerns me with Jimmy G. And if you're getting someone like Jimmy G, you better still draft a rookie, or else, in my opinion, that's not a good move because Jimmy G will not be your franchise quarterback. But they got to make a move. You see what Mike Silver said in his article that, that Washington plans at quarterback will send a message to everyone that status quo is unacceptable. So they're making their intentions super clear, and they're going to go after a big-name quarterback. So let's hope they're able to get one. Next hole I think is very important is middle linebacker. They need to upgrade that position because right now it's I mean, I don't even know if they have a true middle linebacker on their roster right now. So obviously they're going to have to get one. I think ideally you go after someone in free agency. You got Devondre Campbell, who's really good. He's going to cost a little bit of money. A decent amount of money. You got Leighton Vander Esch, who I really like. I think that would be a solid option. Wouldn't be super cheap, but would be a reasonable deal, and you would take him away from a divisional rival. You got the linebacker for the Falcons. I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce his name, especially if we sign him. He's another guy had almost 200 tackles, 192 tackles, had a few picks. He's a guy that can play middle linebacker for you. There's some other options as well. Dante Hightower. There's a lot of guys in free agency that they could go after, but James Davis, very likely that he's going to be an outside linebacker for us. Cole Holcomb could play middle linebacker, but that's more of an emergency situation. I think he's better suited for the outside, so have him on the outside and Jamin Davis on the outside a little bit and get a true middle linebacker in there. That's what they have to do, in my opinion. Hopefully they do in free agency, and if they can't get anyone in free agency, that's when you look for the draft, the first couple rounds. Ideally, though, I wouldn't want to draft the middle linebacker in back-to-back drafts. I think that's less than ideal. Next position that I think that's a hole for Washington. I think they need another offensive weapon, and could be receiver, could be running back, but preferably receiver, because Gibson is a good back. I mean, he has a chance to be one of the better backs in the NFL. Only issue with him is that he is kind of, I don't know if he has the bot. I don't know if he's able to play in a 17-game season consistently without getting banged up all the time, because that's what's happened with him. Last year he was pretty much good up until that turf toe injury that knocked him out. This past season had a shoulder injury, had a shin injury, had a hip injury, had a turf toe injury as well. I mean, a ton of injuries. And if you can get someone like Ronald Jones or James Cook, someone in the mid round of the draft to not necessarily take that many carries away from him, but a few carries a game, 4 or 5 carries a game, and you can have J.D. McKissic primarily as a pass catching back, or you can just use Jarrett Patterson and give him more carries than he had this year, because Gibson, you want him to get a bunch of carries, but at the same time you might have to preserve him a little bit. And now moving on to receiver, I like Curtis Samuel. Obviously love Terry McLaurin. We got to get him, a deal done with him. Curtis Samuel, I think he can be a solid number 2 for you. He can play on the outside, can play on the slot. And, he showed what he could do in Carolina. I mean, his last season there had 1,000+ yards from scrimmage if you combine his rush and receiving yards. But this year, that soft tissue, groin injury really hurt us. He didn't play pretty much at all this year. Never was at full strength. Really only played one game at semi-full strength where they were able to use him. And even in that game, he only played like 25 snaps. So they, I would hope that he, ends up being what they thought he would this year, but you can't really count on that. Same thing with De'Ami Brown. I think regardless, though, Washington's receiving core will be better next year, because I think Terry's going to be a little bit better, going into his 4th year. De'Ami obviously will be better. The question is how much. Can he be that number 3, maybe even number 2 receiver? He didn't show that in his rookie year. Let's see if he can do it in his 2nd year. But I think they do need to add another receiver. And I don't necessarily think it needs to be a big name like Adams, Mike Williams, Chris Godwin. But maybe someone like Christian Kirk, Jacoby Myers, Russell Gage, Cedric Wilson. One of those guys, maybe even Zay Jones. Or you could go into the draft and someone like Garrett Wilson, who I love, Chris Olave, Drake London. But I do think they need to add another receiver out there. Just as, insurance, because if Terry goes down, then you have Curtis Samuel, who, missed the whole last year, and De'Ami Brown is your best receivers, and that can't cut it. So at the very minimum, get the depth better. And, they also have some free agents, Adam Humphries, DeAndre Carter, and Cam Sims. So they really don't have that many guys in the receiving core right now. So we will see what they do there, but I think an upgrade is needed. Next position, and this isn't starters, but I think we should try to improve our O-line depth, because we likely will be losing Brandon Sheriff. So I think adding someone that could be on the same level, if it's a veteran, I think we should bring in someone who is, close to the level of Wes Schweitzer, like a solid starter. Compete with Wes Schweitzer. Whoever wins that battle, that's great. The next guy is one of the better backups in the league. I think that's what they should do. And then, if they don't want to do that, go ahead, get someone in the draft in the first, 4 rounds, maybe the 3rd or 4th round, preferably, and develop him behind Schweitzer for a couple, for maybe a year, even half the season, and he'll be, if you develop him properly, with which I think John Matsko can do. You got to take advantage of this. John Matsko, not sure how long he's going to be here, but you got to take advantage of his, being an elite offensive line coach, being able to develop these guys. So you might as well draft a guy in the 3rd or 4th round and have Matsko develop him, and I think that would be good on the interior offensive line, maybe even a tackle as well. But I like our starting lineup with Leno, Flowers, Chase Roulier, likely Wes Schweitzer, and then Sam Cosmi. But I think adding another guard or tackle would be a good idea, especially with John Matsko as the guy who will help develop him. Last position is free safety. Sorry, it's loading right here. I think they should try to upgrade the free safety position. Bob McCain is a free agent, so obviously if he doesn't re-sign here, they definitely need to go after a free agent, and because their starter will be probably Jeremy Reeves, and I like Reeves. I just don't think he's a starter in this league. So there's some guys out there, big name guys, Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus Williams, Marcus May, Jesse Bates. Don't necessarily need to go after a big name. Could just, re-sign by McCain and get someone like, someone in the draft that you can develop for a few years, just like the guard. I don't think it's like a huge position in need, but it's definitely a position that they could upgrade. And if Bob McCain leaves, then you might as well go for the step up over Bob McCain. Maybe Anthony Harris, maybe Roddy McLeod. They both played for the Eagles, played pretty well. Anthony May is another guy. He had his issues this year. I think he had a DUI, not so sure, but he's another guy that you could go after. And Jesse Bates and Tyrann Mathieu, those guys will be very expensive, but are, other options. It's not like a huge need, because Bob McCain is serviceable. And, over the first half of the season, he was not good. Over the second half, he was good, above average safety in this league. And, Ron Rivera usually doesn't have that many, in Carolina, he didn't have any like huge big name safeties. Trey Boston, a couple other guys. So he could just stick with Bob McCain, and that would be fine with me. But still, adding someone in the draft, whether it's the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, just like the guard position, I think it would be good to do. So that is going to be it for today's video. Let me know what, the 5 biggest holes for you that you guys think for the Washington football team. There's definitely other holes on this team. They could always add another defensive lineman for depth. There's a bunch of positions that could, we could use depth at. Same thing with corner. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button and subscribe if you guys are new. Also turn on those notifications so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching and enjoy Playoff Sunday. Peace.